I don't know how it is in your neighborhood, but this is a design disaster. All we're trying to do is have a nice place to receive the mail and daily newspaper. Now, you can't have the newspaper delivered inside your mailbox. You have to have a separate container. So look what my neighbors have done. One has attached a piece of PVC conduit. It's kind of small. The newspaper companies often supply boxes. Here's one of those, and it's been knocked over. This neighbor's missing the front cover to the mailbox. This neighbor got a little more creative. He took the box from the newspaper company and attached it to the post. That's a slight improvement. And here's what I'm faced with. Now, I'm sorry to say that I didn't build this post. I actually picked it up at the local home center 6 years ago and just threw a mailbox on it. It's not looking very good. The mailbox is too small, and I had to have a separate post and box put in for my newspaper. It's not very attractive. Today's a day for some improvement. I've been waiting for this issue. Now here's our version of the mailbox. Let me show you some of the features. It's made out of MDO plywood and redwood. The whole assembly is going to sit over a pressure-treated post which we'll install in the ground first. There's a base at the bottom, mitered at the corners. There's a redwood quarter round. And the post is also made out of MDO plywood. I don't want to use solid wood because I don't want checks or splits. And if I miter solid wood, I'm afraid it's going to open up. This material is very stable, so I feel good in mitering these corners. I think they'll stay nice and tight. And then I cut a chamfer detail in it. This brace is redwood. We have a slot for the newspaper. And there's a couple things I want to improve on the next one. I want to make this slot about 1 inch taller to take the Sunday paper. And I want to cut some slots in the bottom to remove any moisture. There's plenty of room on the side for my nameplate or my street number. And I have a generous sized mailbox for all the mail and catalogs. Up at the top, I have a little post cap and then a turned finial. Here are a couple pieces of 2x6 redwood for the brace, and I'm going to glue those together. I need a nice flat surface at the glue joint, and these pieces are a little bit twisted from sitting around in storage. So if I run the mating surfaces through my joiner, that'll take care of everything, making it nice and flat. But before we use any power tools, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. All right, now I'm ready to glue it up. I'm using a polyurethane glue, and I just like to put it on and then take a scrap piece of wood and spread it out. And wear gloves, because once you get this stuff on your hands, it doesn't come off. Okay, that's nice and even. Let's put the two pieces together, and we'll clamp it up. I also have 3 pieces here, which I'll glue up to make the finial. All right, we'll let that cook for a while. Here I'm setting up to make the post. I have 4 pieces of 3/4 inch MDO plywood. I've tipped the saw to 45 degrees. I'll run all 4 pieces through on this edge, adjust the fence, and then do the other edge. I'm going to reinforce those miters with number 10 biscuits every 8.5 inches and glue. Okay, now for some assembly. I've already installed the biscuits on this side of the joint, and we'll slip all 4 pieces together and then clamp it up. Let's look at the prototype. We're ready to start working on the newspaper slot. It's made up of a piece of 3/4 inch plywood that's edged in redwood, and the sides and bottom are 1/2 inch plywood. The sides are tapered so that it doesn't look too bulky. To do that, I have to bevel this top edge of the side piece at 4 degrees and this bottom edge so that it'll be level. I also have to bevel each edge of this bottom piece at 4 degrees to get a nice tight fit. That 4-degree bevel is very slight, but it's important. Let's take another look at the prototype and the back of the newspaper slot. I suppose I could have just brought the back piece up square, but I thought it looked better to have this flare. So that means I have to have a compound miter on this corner. To make that compound cut, I've tipped my saw to 45 degrees, turned my miter gauge to 4 degrees, the angle of the flare, and I put a witness mark on the piece to make sure I'm going in the right direction. Now I'll just cut all the pieces. Here I'm beginning to shape the front edge of the newspaper box. I've made the square cut. I'll cut the curve over at the bandsaw. All the joints are going to be secured with biscuits and glue. And this is the last piece. This is actually the bottom. And once that's in, we'll clamp it up. Okay, this piece is the piece we glued up earlier for the brace. When I took it out of the clamps, I planed it down so that it was 3 inches thick. Now I've laid out the angle cuts, and I'll do that at the table saw. Boy, that is so close. My blade doesn't quite make it through. Instead of flipping it over, I'm just going to take a mat knife and cut the rest of it. Now I'm taking a cardboard template that I made to mark out the curve of the brace, and we'll cut it at the bandsaw. The back edges of the brace are simply rounded over with a little bit of sandpaper. I want to chamfer the front edge, but I want to stop at these pencil marks because this part of the brace is going to be mortised into the post and the newspaper slot. With this setup, I can square up one end of my glued up post and then trim it to length. Before I can install the box to hold the newspaper, I want to put the decorative chamfers on the post. If I wait till later, I won't be able to get my router close enough. I've laid out each beginning and end point, and I'm using the same chamfering bit that I used on the brace. With the assembled box for the newspaper out of the clamps, the next step is to cut a square hole so I can slide it over the post. I've laid it out. I'm going to make the initial cuts with the circular saw and then finish them off with a jigsaw. Doesn't have to be perfect because the edge will get covered with a molding later. All right, that's going to be good. Each end of the brace sits in a mortise. One has to be cut in the bottom of the box for the newspaper, and one has to be cut in the post. So I made a jig, took some 1/2-inch plywood, and made a cutout that's 1/8 of an inch bigger all the way around than what I need. I'm going to use my router to plow out the mortise. I've set it up with a 3/8-inch bit and a 5/8-inch collar. The collar will bump around the inside of the jig. The bit will do the work. clean out the corners, I'm using this spring-loaded corner chisel. With the collar removed and a guide fence installed on my router, I'm able to make some drainage slots in the bottom of the newspaper box. Okay, let's put it together. First, we'll slip the newspaper box right over the column down to a clamp which holds it in the right position. Then I'll take and put some polyurethane glue on each end of the brace. And then we'll slip that into those mortises that we machined. That should be plenty. There, and there. And that locks that into position. Now I have a piece of this 1/2-inch plywood which fits inside the box, and I've put some glue on it, and I'm going to slide it all the way in until it hits the post. Can't really get a nail gun in there, so the glue will have to do the job. But I can get a nail gun on the outside, so I'll just put a couple tacks on each side. All right, I don't think I need any additional clamps. We'll let this cook overnight, and we'll easily finish the woodworking tomorrow. I got started this morning cutting some pieces of plywood, mitering the corners, and making biscuit slots for a base, which is going to wrap the post. And all I'll do is put a little glue on each joint and attach it with some brads. Now here's the fourth piece to complete the surround. Using a 1/2-inch roundover bit, I've completed the first step in making a molding that's going to sit on top of that base trim. Now I'll rip a piece off of each edge, which will yield the 1/4 round that I need. Now I carefully miter the pieces at each corner, and I'll nail them on with some brads. Here I've made some 1/4-inch thick, 3/4-inch wide pieces of redwood mitered at the corners to cover all the exposed plywood edges. Now I'm installing a 1/4-inch 1/4 round to seal the gap between the newspaper box and the post. I made it the same way as I made the one for the base, except that I used a smaller bit. Using a 1/2-inch radius cove bit, I've made the first pass to create the Scotia molding, which will go under the cap. This Scotia sits flush with the top of the post, and it'll sit just underneath the cap. Here's the cap and finial assembly for the top of the post. There's a bevel around all 4 edges to allow the water to run off, and then there's a little shoulder cut, which is more of a decorative feature. The first thing I want to do to my blank for that cap is make that shoulder cut. The blade is at 13/16, and I'll just run each edge against the fence. Here I'm using a tenoning jig to hold the piece in a vertical position while I push it through the blade, which is tipped to 20 degrees. This is a block which will locate the cap right on the center of the post. This drops inside that hollow center core. Now I'm gluing a piece of plywood on top of our newspaper storage box, and I'll just center it and attach it with some brads, and that'll be to hold the mailbox. Most mailboxes have a recess in the bottom, about 3/4 of an inch deep, and a series of holes along the side. So I just drop it over that piece of plywood that I just installed, and we'll secure it with some screws after everything else is painted. Now it's time to turn a finial. Here's what we're trying to get to. Here's the blank that I glued up earlier, cut to size. I drew a circle showing the largest diameter that I have to get to, and the first thing I want to do is clip off these corners at the saw. That'll save me time at the lathe. I've mounted the blank in the lathe. The objective is to make it into a column. To do that, I'll use a gouge. With the blank now turned into a column, I'm going to take some measurements from the end and put a mark at each transition point of this turning. Not quite there yet. For the ball itself, I've turned once again to my wide gouge. Okay, that's it on the sanding. Let's see if I can't cut it loose. Okay, now we'll put some glue on the bottom of our finial, and I have a long screw through a pre-drilled hole of the cap. Just drive that together. Okay, that's not going to go anywhere. And now a little bit of glue around the top edge of our post, and we'll just drop the whole assembly right on there. That should do it. How about a coat of paint? This is a perfect project for spray paint. I'm starting out with a primer, gray in color. And I really want to make sure I treat this bottom edge because that's going to be very close to the ground and I don't want it sucking up moisture. And I'll also treat the bottom of this newspaper box before I stand it up to do the rest of the spraying. Okay, let's put it up on our stand. All right. And continue. The reason I like this MDO is the same reason the sign painters do. It takes paint great, and you get a nice, smooth finish in the end. It's important to use restraint when spraying. You don't want to try to put one heavy coat on which will develop runs. The key is to do multiple thin coats. The paint dries fast enough that you'll be able to come back fairly quickly and put an additional coat. Well, now we'll wait a few minutes and we'll be able to put on the final coats. We decided to do a two-tone paint job on our mailbox. The features of the base, the brace, and this finial will be a dark green. After carefully masking off all the green areas, I'm now applying the field color, which is sort of this vanilla. A couple coats of this, and we'll be ready to install it. Oops. Well, I hope I get this installed before the mail gets delivered. I can't wait to see the look on the postman's face. Now, let's see if we can wiggle this old one loose. When I put it in, it was good gravel here, so this would be great if it doesn't cave in. Ooh, that's going to be good. And I guess it's also time to get rid of this newspaper box. All right. Now, the first piece that I'm going to install is going to be a piece of pressure-treated 4x4. That way it won't rot out in the ground, and get it down in this hole. Oh, that's going to be good. Now I think I'll throw a little gravel around that and tamp it down so it's nice and plumb. Our old friends at the fence company have warned us about setting a post in concrete. There's nothing that ruins a post quicker than that. Gravel is the best way to go. Okay, that's good. Now we'll take the post, slip it right over the top. Great. Now I'll get a couple screws and secure it. That should do it. Hey, look at this. Here comes my mailman. I wonder what he's going to think.
Hey,
how you doing?
You got a bigger mailbox.
Well, hope it does the job. Man, it's a good thing I did get a bigger mailbox.
Have a good day.
Take care. I guess he liked it.